Welcome to a story older than kings, laws, and definitely older than that one friend who insists he could totally run a country better. This is the real tale of how humans, normal, sensible, survival-driven humans, willingly handed over freedoms that no one could ever take back. Not because they were stupid, not because they were weak, but because the people asking for those freedoms were brilliant manipulators who understood human psychology before psychology existed. To understand how we lost our freedom, we have to return to the start, to the moment humans looked at each other and said, someone should be in charge, a sentence that has never ended well. Before rulers, laws, borders and taxes, humans lived in small bands, usually under 50 people, and here's the important bit. They were free, but freedom was exhausting. You had to find food, avoid predators, mend relationships, and identify which mushrooms made you see your ancestors dancing in the clouds. But in this world, everyone knew each other. Status existed, sure, but nobody could boss the group around without the group laughing them out of the campfire. This is the anthropologists call egalitarian, meaning everyone was too busy not dying to boss other people around. The original blueprint for authority wasn't a crown, it wasn't a throne, it wasn't even a guy with a stick yelling, "I'm in charge now." It was fear when predators circled the camp, when storms destroyed shelters, when a rival tribe was nearby. One person always stepped forward, not because they were chosen, but because they were loud, confident and convincing. The oldest trick in leadership: act certain when everyone else is scared. Fear makes the brain beg for structure. Structure becomes authority, authority becomes habit, and habit becomes, I guess this guy is our leader now. Once humans realised fear made people follow, the next step was genius. Turn leadership into a story, make it symbolic, make it dramatic, make it sound like the universe personally approved of you. This is where shamans, spiritual leaders and early storytellers stepped in. They weren't just relaying myths, they were shaping social order. That the spirits spoke to me. You know, I've seen the future, trust me. The ancestors think we need rules. Congratulations, you know, you have just invented political messaging. And here's the psychological twist. When stories explain danger, people obey them. Obedience becomes tradition, tradition becomes authority. The earliest leaders understood a rule that modern governments still use. If you want someone's freedom, tell them you're protecting them. This was the birth of the protection bargain, a psychological contract that goes like this. You give us a little control, we keep you safe. You give us more control, we avoid disaster. You give us everything, and now you're stuck. It didn't feel like tyranny, it felt like order, but every new duty, every new expectation, every new ritual was a tiny slice of freedom taken off the top, and tiny slices add up. Humans love structure. If you give them 3 rules, they'll invent 5 more. At this stage in history, leaders began to create fixed rules. Some were harmless, don't take someone else's food. Some made sense, don't leave camp during lion season. Some were questionable, don't whistle at the moon or it steals your voice. But rules have power, not because they're written, but because they're enforced. Eventually, the group stopped questioning why and started asking who enforces this, and boom, that's where hierarchy enters the chat. Every leader discovers the same thing. You can't control people alone. This is where the first enforcers appear, the loyal warriors, big strong hunters, or people who never skipped a day of carrying boulders for fun. Their job was simple: keep order, protect the leader, and occasionally convince others that rules were non-negotiable. Psychologically, this taps into dominance hierarchy, where humans respect those who can apply force or prevent it. Now, freedom wasn't limited by nature, it was limited by other humans. That's when things start to get interesting and dangerous. Once rules, roles and rituals existed, power stopped being about survival, it became about strategy. Leaders realised they could shape norms that benefited them: more food for them, more mates for them, more prestige for them, fewer questions from everyone else. This is where, you see the earliest version of political manipulation: fear messaging, social pressure, public punishment, selective storytelling, moral framing, divine approval, claims. In psychological terms, this is the emergence of structural inequality built on soft coercion disguised as tradition. And humans fell for it because the system was already familiar. Once people believe this is how things work, they stop imagining that it could be any other way. Once a behaviour lasts long enough, humans stop seeing it as a decision and start seeing it as a fact of life. This is the psychological lock known as social inertia. Once a system feels natural, people defend it even if it hurts them.
This is just how our people live. We've always done it this way. Why question what works?
Tradition is brilliant because it requires no justification. It carries authority without effort. Leaders loved it because it meant less arguing and more obedience. This is how freedom fades quietly, not through violence, but through familiarity. Tradition is brilliant because it requires no justification. It carries authority without effort. And leaders loved it because it meant less arguing and more obedience. This is how freedom fades quietly, not through violence, but through familiarity. Here comes one of the biggest psychological shifts in human history. Someone decided that land could be owned. Before this moment, humans shared space the way animals do, moving with seasons, climate and migration patterns. But then agriculture appeared, farming, permanent structures, resources fixed in one place. This area is ours. These borders matter. You can't cross that ridge. It belongs to our leader. And here's the psychological trick. If something can be owned, it must be protected. If it's protected, you need rules. If you need rules, someone will enforce them. If someone enforces them, someone must lead them. Freedom shrank the moment land stopped being a shared resource and became a controlled asset. Now we enter the age of codified law, not don't annoy the moon, but actual structured rules carved in wood, stone or clay. The intention: to keep order, to manage growing populations, to avoid chaos. The unintended side effect: the law became a tool of power, not fairness. Laws sound objective, but early laws always favoured leadership, families, elite hunters, wealthy landholders, religious authorities, anyone close to power. If you broke a rule, punishment. If someone close to the leader broke the same rule, a slap on the wrist. This inequity made people resentful, but they remained obedient because punishment was public, humiliating and terrifying. Psychology calls this deterrence conditioning. Leaders call it keeping the peace. After rules and land, the next step was genius level manipulation, taxation. It wasn't called that yet, but the idea was simple. You give part of your harvest to the leader so the group can survive. Sounds noble, right? Except the leader got the biggest share, his enforcers got the next share, priests and shamans took theirs. Only a fraction returned to the group. This is the psychological brilliance of tax. It flips the script. Instead of leaders serving the people serve the system. Now, power wasn't just symbolic, it was economic. And once economic power exists, freedom becomes negotiable. Propaganda is ancient. Long before printing presses or television, leaders mastered the art of narrative control. They used myths, ritual ceremonies, cautionary tales, heroic stories, symbolic objects, public displays, all designed to reinforce one message. We are in charge because we are supposed to be. This taps into authority bias, the tendency to believe people who appear confident, sacred, or endorsed by tradition. It also taps into groupthink. People prefer harmony to conflict, so they accept the narrative even if it's nonsense. This is how leaders locked their power in place without lifting a weapon. Once leaders realised how effective fear stories, rules, land and taxes were, they didn't stop, they doubled down. More rules, more ceremonies, more punishments, more sacred symbols, more hierarchy, more for your own good. What began as protection against lions had become protection against disobedience. This is the core pattern of every political system ever created. Power expands until it meets resistance. Freedom shrinks until someone notices, and most people never notice, not until it's too late. Eventually some humans looked around and said, wait a second, why does he get everything? Why do we follow these rules? Who decided he's in charge forever? Why can't we not do that? And so came the earliest rebellions, small, disorganized, and usually crushed, but psychologically critical. These moments showed that freedom wasn't gone, just buried. Rebellions revealed a fundamental truth. People will accept inequality until it becomes intolerable, but once they realise the system isn't unchangeable, everything becomes possible, including revolution. When populations grew, tribes merged into chiefdoms, chiefdoms became proto-cities, cities became states. This is where structure becomes bureaucracy. Now authority required, treasuries, councils, scribes, officers, courts, enforcers, religious advisors, managers of managers who managed other managers. Governments promised stability, predictable life, protection from chaos, but every new department required new rules, and every new rule reduced a bit more personal freedom, slowly, quietly, permanently. Here we reach a huge milestone: documents that legally define power, contracts, treaties, laws, decrees, charters. Now authority wasn't just tradition, it was written, sealed and enforceable. This made leaders untouchable. People didn't fully understand these documents. Most couldn't read, but they trusted them because they looked important, sounded official, and came from those already in power. And that's the trick. The more formal a limitation on your freedom appears, the more legitimate it feels. Humans accepted all this because our brains are wired for avoiding uncertainty, seeking stability, trusting confident leaders, obeying social norms, fearing punishment, conforming to the group, believing moral stories, valuing short-term safety over long-term liberty. Combine these instincts with fear-based messaging and the appearance of competence, and people surrender freedom voluntarily. Freedom wasn't taken, it was traded, and most people didn't realise what they traded until centuries later. Eventually no one remembered the old world, the world without rulers, taxes, documents, or enforced obedience. People believed hierarchy was natural, inevitable, sacred, logical, permanent. Leaders didn't need to justify control anymore. Control justified itself. And that is the real story of how humanity lost its freedom, not in a single moment, not through violent conquest, not through a wicked master plan, but through slow psychological shifts, tiny agreements, small compromises that accumulated into a system no one remembered choosing. We think our world is different, more advanced, more rational, more enlightened, but the same psychological levers still work: fear, tradition, authority, storytelling, hierarchy, dependence. The mechanisms haven't changed, and only the branding has. Understanding where power truly began is the first step to recognizing how it still shapes our lives today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please subscribe for more deep dives into how power really works. There's so much more to uncover. The past took our freedom slowly. The future depends on whether we ever take it